You got it. We are only seeing a blue screen, but we are hearing the comm check audio. Drew on 2, we're ready for an audio check. Good audio, Drew. And Drew, the remote party has good audio. We're still working video. We should be good to go on time in 10 minutes. Okay, copy, sounds good. Okay, I'll give it a second, but I'm still seeing the blue screen. Yep, still a blue screen. I see video now. Roger.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Roger that. I have both audio and video. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks, Johnson. Okay, bye. Woohoo!
Hey, go on our department page. He was just there. We're about to start.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'll do it. All right, I'll get on that.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay, baby.
You look so giddy.
the International Space Station for a comm check.
Roger, Colonel Morgan, we hear you loud. Roger, Colonel Morgan, we hear you loud.
I heard the first part of your transmission, and just checking in for one more comm check.
Roger, Colonel Morgan, we hear you loud and clear. We hear you loud and clear.
Got you loud and clear as well. Welcome aboard the ISS.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you so much for having us. We have...
It's my pleasure. I've been looking forward to this for several weeks, and considering the circumstances, I understand that the cadets are dispersed all across the country, so I'm glad that we're able to pull this together. We all have one thing in common right now, and is that we are all in isolation and having to communicate by VTC and telephone, and I'm just so glad that we're able to pull it off, and you guys were able to join me tonight.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it too. We really appreciate it too. So we'll start off the questions. With Colonel Wallen.
This is Lieutenant Colonel Ben Wallen speaking on behalf of Dirtman. How have you used your environmental engineering education throughout your career, especially as an astronaut?
Well, if I could, I would like to broaden that to how I've used my West Point education as throughout my career. First of all, of course, we're all biased. I feel like I'm really proud of the high quality, the rigorous, the well-rounded education that I got at West Point. I did, as you are aware, I'm a graduate of the environmental engineering, geography and environmental engineering department. I was drawn to geography and environmental engineering because it combined a lot of very interesting subjects to me. I was interested in chemistry and biology and geology and physical geography and engineering, chemical engineering, civil engineering, and just brought all those things together very nicely. And then after I made the decision to go to medical school, some of the engineering mindset I put aside for a while, but then revisited that very much as an astronaut. I frequently rely on that skill set, that baseline engineering mindset that I got as a result of the well-rounded, outstanding education that I got at the academy.
This is Cadet Anthony Haynes. How have you applied the experiences in your time in special operations developed on the ISS? What you can share on someone biology course?
I'm afraid, if you wouldn't mind repeating the question that came in very broken.
I'm Cadet Anthony Haynes. How have you applied the experiences from your time in special operations medicine to developing your niche on the ISS? Which of your experiences would you pass along to someone interested in pursuing bioastronautics or space medicine?
So, yeah, absolutely. My medical background has always been a great asset when I've been a part of teams, both in special operations and then also now as a NASA astronaut. But, I think one of the things that I equally draw upon are the soldier skills and the operational skills that I had as a result of those experiences. Certainly working in and around aircraft, helicopters as a flight surgeon, static line and free fall parachuting, combat diving, all those skill sets challenged in different ways. But also just fundamental soldier skills like shooting, moving and communicating, land navigation, and all those basic things that you've learned as part of being a cadet. those have been valuable skills to me as part of various training that I've done, both in special operations as well as an astronaut.
Hello, I'm Cadet Ian Morris, asking a question for Cadet Gardner Crary. How have you applied your environmental engineering background on the International Space Station?
Yeah, as I alluded to about kind of my broader appreciation for the education that I got at West Point, as a physician, certainly the engineering mindset did come into, I found it to give me a different perspective than the typical pre-medical background. But then once I was selected as an astronaut, I frequently found myself relying on, as we've learned, the complexities of the ISS and our spacesuit and our launch vehicles, the spacecraft that we fly to get here, and we've had to learn those systems. Those fundamental engineering classes that I took, like statics and dynamics and mechanics and materials, thermodynamics, fluid mechanics, are things that I had not experienced since I was a cadet, and I found those to be invaluable to me. Then, after 15 years into my career, when I then had to reach back into that kit bag that I filled when I was a cadet.
Sir Cadet Adam Johantis, what unexpected aspect of your cadet experience has been the most valuable to succeeding in the Army astronaut program?
Well, if you ask my wife, she would say that she was the most unexpected aspect of my cadet experience, because she and I met as cadets, and we've been married now for 20 years, and we have 4 children. And, this is a great segue for me to tell you the importance of, many of you, if not all of you, one day will have families of your own, and the importance of, as you go through your career, have your family to be co-opted as part of that, as part of your team, and have buy-in to the career that you're choosing to pursue. But then I would also have to say that, a lot of the things that you're learning about leadership and being a team member, being a member of a team, but also leading teams, I can't overemphasize enough the value that has brought to me throughout my career, both in special operations medicine, but now as an astronaut and living on board the International Space Station. Those basic things that you've learned about taking care of others, respect of others, living by an honor code, those things have been invaluable to me, and as equally as valuable as the technical and academic-based things that I've brought through from my education there.
Cadet Jacob Supia asks, what is your favorite space movie?
What is your favorite space movie? Well, I would have to say, first of all, that all astronauts have a little bit of a science fiction bent to them, for sure. That we all have a little bit of a science fiction aspect to us. But I would, if I was leaning one way or the other, I was certainly always very drawn toward the Star Wars movies. But if I had to pick one non-fiction movie and I think there are many astronauts that would agree with this, The Right Stuff, I think by far one of my favorites, and definitely a favorite among astronauts in general, for sure.
We have another question from Zoa. Who asked, do you know that you wanted to become an astronaut? Do you know that you wanted to be an astronaut when you were an environmental engineer at West Point? And if not, then what led you to want to become one?
Well, as a kid, I grew up in the time when the space shuttle was flying very regularly. I lived through the Challenger disaster and the Columbia disaster. Apollo astronauts were very much heroes of every generation since they flew, but I just remember it very vividly. And so I was always inspired and always had in my head that, boy, that would be very cool to be an astronaut one day, but I certainly didn't plan my career around becoming one. I generally describe myself as a soldier, a physician, and an astronaut, and I made my decisions in that order. Once I knew that there was a West Point, I knew that was all that I ever wanted to do. I wanted to serve in the military more than anything in my life, and going to West Point seemed like the best way to get there. And then I made the decision to become a physician because I thought the thing that I was most passionate about, which is really important, I think, is to pursue your passion. And my passion was to take care of soldiers doing the most dangerous missions that are done in our Army. And so I pursued a career in special operations medicine. Always in the back of my head, I thought, wow, it would be really neat to be an astronaut, be a part of that team. I've always been inspired by that. I've drawn to it. And the only way to know whether you have what it takes is apply. And so I applied, and I thought, there was no astronaut in the astronaut corps that had my kind of background. So I thought there's no way I'll ever be selected. And here I am now, 7 years after I was selected on the ISS, and I'm 8 months into a 9-month mission on the International Space Station.
This is Mike Butkus. Do you have any thoughts on how to improve water recovery in space?
Well, our environmental control and life support system, or ECLSS we call it, one of the unique aspects of it is that we do reclaim water here on the ISS. We take the condensation from our breathing, and we condense that down, and we process that for water. But we also take our urine and turn it back into drinking water as well. And so overall, we reclaim about 80%, give or take, of the water that is recycled, then is reclaimed. And so I pitch that back to you. You guys are the ones that are on the cutting edge of engineering and environmental engineering specifically. And we're going to need great minds like yours to figure out how we can do this more efficiently, more effectively, because as we go further back to the moon and on to Mars, that requires us to have new technologies. And while we have good equipment now, good hardware to reclaim our water, we can always improve, and there are great minds out there that are going to solve those tough problems so that we can go on to the moon and Mars and stay there.
I am Cadet Abigail Peterson. I major in space science and hope to become a medevac pilot, possibly a space operations officer. What advice would you give yourself when you were a COW at West Point?
Well, I'll start by saying I know that you probably all hear about how all old grads say the Corps has, and I'm here to tell you that every time I've returned to West Point, I've been so impressed by how it continues to improve and get better and better. And as a cadet, I never appreciated all the great opportunities that were available there. And so one thing I would tell you is to take advantage of the incredible opportunities and the mentors that are around you, the great people. But then one aspect of that, some part of the great people around you are your classmates and your friends. You're building friendships for life, and you are different than any other college student in that then you will then spend a career with these same people as your peer group for the remainder of your career and the remainder of your life. I look at the people who have supported me throughout my career, and specifically in the last year, as I've launched and spent this time away from my family, 9 months up here, I still go back. My West Point classmates, my friends, my teammates, my company mates that I remain in touch with have been the greatest support. And I would tell you, invest in those friendships and those mentorships that you have, those opportunities you have there as a cadet. They're once in a lifetime.
I'm Cadet Luke Pingelli. What is the most striking geographic feature to view from space, and why?
One more time on that question, please.
I'm Cadet Luke Pingelli. What is the most striking geographic feature to view from space, and why?
Wow, that that is really tough to pick out just even a handful. But I'll tell you about some of my recent experiences. Just today, I was taking pictures of some flooding in Zambia and Africa, and looking down on Africa through a great window that's earth facing, and was using a large telephoto lens and just following these beautiful rivers up in Africa. I would also say night passes. Some of the times that we've flown over the Mediterranean, Africa, and the Middle East at night, it's so incredible because you can pick out all the geography. It's, you know, especially in North Africa and in the Middle East, frequently they're without cloud cover. You can pick out the geography from the lights of the cities alone, and it's just unbelievable.
Cadet Matthew Sanders asks, what exercises do you do in space to stay physically fit, and how are they modified to accommodate for limited gravity?
Exercise is extremely important up here because we view it as it's a countermeasure to the effects, the long-term effects of microgravity, which we know can have a deleterious effect on our bones and our muscles. And the exercise countermeasures that we perform up here have been effective at counteracting that. So we have 2 hours in our day dedicated to exercise, two types, both resistive training, which weightlifting would be on the ground, and then cardiovascular exercise. And we have two types of cardiovascular exercise. We can run on a treadmill where we wear a harness, and it has some bungee cords that hold us down against the treadmill. And so otherwise, if I was running on a treadmill, I would just come right off, but the harness holds me down. And then we also have a bike that has clip-in pedals, so our feet stay attached to the pedals. It's like a unicycle without a seat because it doesn't need a seat, no gravity to hold me down on a seat, and we pedal in place. And it's a very tough cardiovascular exercise. And then we have a resistive exercise device that uses a series of vacuum pistons to generate force, and we're able to do exercises like bench press and deadlift and squats, and those recreate a load using that series of pistons that hold us down against a force plate, and our bodies experience the load just as if we were on Earth. And many astronauts return to Earth after their long-duration missions up here in better shape than when they left, because we are working out 6 and sometimes 7 days a week. Now, I will add to that. I will be taking the ACFT shortly after I get home, within a couple of months, and I see that it looks like a really tough fitness test, and I'm going to have to work extra hard to do that. And luckily, I won't have to run the IOCT anytime soon. I would not be in shape for that. I know how tough that is.
I'm Cadet Kieran Place. What are the mental and physical obstacles that occur in space, and how do you overcome these obstacles?
Certainly, they are very similar to what you would experience when you go on a deployment. I have found them to be very similar. There's still the separation from family. There are times of intermittent stress followed by periods of relative boredom at times. There's isolation and confinement to the relatively same environment. And as a result of that does create a little bit of cumulative stress over time. But we have great connectivity with our friends and family. I'm able to call home using a internet phone. I call home daily. I'm able to talk to my wife and kids. I also have a video conference with them once a week. We have great medical support. I talk to my flight surgeon once a week, and I talk to mission psychiatrist every other week or so. So we have very robust support on the ground to make sure that we're doing well. And we balance work with some time off. Most of our days are scheduled very full, but we do have time off in the evenings, and we have time off on the weekends usually. And so I have found it to be very similar to what I experienced in military deployments, similar to what you all experienced in military deployments one day as well.
I am Shay Baker, asking a question from Cadet Stephen McCarty.
What is the proper protocol when someone gets sick in space?
Sickness in space, I would say we tackle that in a couple of different ways. One, we like to make sure that astronauts are very well screened and very healthy when we arrive, so that reduces the risk up front. Then, as I alluded to, we have good connectivity with the ground, so we can talk to a flight surgeon at any time, both over the radio, over the phone, or by a face-to-face chat. We have medications and equipment pre-positioned up here. While there's no requirement for there to be a physician on board at all times, while I happen to be a physician, there's no requirement that we have one. One of the crew members is always trained as a crew medical officer, so they get some additional training on basic medical emergencies and what equipment is on board and how to use it. And then finally, in the event that there was a serious emergency, a life-threatening, eyesight-threatening emergency, the vehicle that I flew up, the Soyuz vehicle, is still docked to the station, so we always have a way to return to Earth if we needed to. In a matter of a day or so, we could have somebody on the ground if it was really dire emergency that we needed to put somebody in a hospital, say, to have surgery. We could do it, but unfortunately, we would have to send the entire crew home with them. So we wouldn't just send one person. We'd have to send the entire crew of 3 that flew up on that vehicle. But great question.
Sir, I'm Cadet Remondelli. Due to your background in medicine and the recent COVID-19 pandemic, how did NASA astronauts protect astronauts from viruses and bacteria prior to going to space? And are there any other planetary microbes possible in the future missions to Mars and the Moon?
Yeah, I know that's on everybody's mind right now, and it's something that of course NASA is taking as seriously as everyone else. So I'll tell you that the crew that is going to replace us, that will arrive here in just a little bit over 2 weeks, is already in quarantine. But this quarantine that they're in is routine. We always put astronauts in quarantine for 2 weeks or so prior to launch. Sometimes it's closer to 3 weeks. To keep only select pre-screened people in contact with us, because getting any infectious disease, COVID-19, on a long list of many that we wouldn't want to be on board here with us on the ISS. So the quarantine routine that we go through for the crew that's getting ready to launch, they're in quarantine right now, and that is no different than we would, maybe a few extra precautions here and there, but for the most part, it's just part of the pre-launch sequence for astronauts to be in quarantine. Now, because my crew, Jessica, Oleg, and I will return to Earth, and they're very much, we expect that a lot of this current pandemic will be ongoing. They will be taking additional precautions with us that we would not typically need to. We will probably be in a little bit of a quarantine period afterwards, because when we return to Earth, we have a relative immunocompromise. We are relatively immunocompromised, and so they were going to go through take some extra measures to make sure that we are safe. In terms of your question about microbes out there in the universe, as an interesting anecdote, when the Apollo astronauts went to the moon, they actually spent more time in quarantine when they returned than they did actually on the mission, and that was because we didn't have a good understanding of whether there were unknown microbes on the surface of the moon. And now based on what we know, we don't think that there's anything to be concerned about. But the field of astrobiology and studying what is potentially out there is a growing field and a fascinating one, and it'll be a great one. Lots of unanswered questions out there about that.
I'm Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Pfluger with my sons Isaac and Seth. Asking you a question for Cadet Jeremy Good. What was your biggest challenge as a leader, either in the Army, NASA, or elsewhere?
Well, I think that leading under conditions of austerity, when people are uncomfortable, are tired, are hungry, are stressed, fatigued, those are the situations that the young leaders, the cadets at West Point are being trained for. That's what you live for, is leading when people don't want to be led. And something that I experienced certainly as a cadet through times in combat in Afghanistan and Iraq, leading teams of medical providers, taking care of injured soldiers, induces stress that brings out sometimes the best in people, but sometimes the worst in people. And these are the things that are challenging for leaders. And similar here on the ISS, not everything. Often find ourselves in stressful situations, and we see each other at our best and at our worst. And leading people in times of challenge, I think that is by far probably one of the greatest challenges that I've experienced over the course of my career.
This is Brigadier General Jeb, Dean of the Academic Board. I have a question from Cadet Eric Parr, who asks, what do you think is the importance of space in future warfare, and how might knowledge of space impact our careers as officers?
Yes, ma'am. Great question. Thank you for joining us today. Well, the world has changed a lot just in the 8 to 9 months now that I've been up here, and some of those changes have been in DoD space and the organization of DoD space, and things like this fall, the creation of the U.S. Space, or the resurrection of the U.S. Space Command as a combatant command, as well as the establishment of the United States Space Force. It just goes to show the importance that space has to the DoD. And as you are probably all well aware, that the Army is is the largest user of space-enabled capabilities in the DoD, and I don't expect that that's going to change anytime in the future. So it's a dynamic time in DoD space, as it is in space in general right now, and it's a great time to be part of Army space, and I'm proud to be an Army astronaut during this interesting time.
Sir, I'm Cadet Samuel Haseman. With the ISS on track to be decommissioned in the next 10 years, and NASA shifting focus back to manned exploration, what is the likelihood of another long-term research station in orbit?
Well, as I alluded to, that we're kind of at an inflection point in space, not only in DoD space, but also in civilian space agencies. And as I am detailed to NASA, and our mission is the peaceful exploration of space, and the ISS is built around that concept, NASA does intend to develop a commercial low Earth orbit industry, and whether that creates some spin-off opportunities for other or expansion of the existing International Space Station using commercial partners is something that NASA is actively pursuing. But right now, NASA is also very much focused on the Artemis program, which is our program to return back to the moon, to the lunar surface, in the next decade in a more sustainable way as part of an international partnership. And one aspect of that is the Gateway, which is a small, you could think of it as a small international space station. It's a small space station that will be in orbit around the moon, and it will serve as a platform to launch missions down to the surface, but also as a servicing and research platform in a similar way to the ISS. So yes, in lunar orbit, there are plans as part of the Artemis program, and the ISS program will continue for the foreseeable future. And we're going to see our commercial partners continue to build on what the ISS program has built here over the last 20 plus years.
I'm John Weaver. I'd like to know what breaks most often on the space station.
One more time, if I could, on that question. There was a little bit of a break in the comm.
I'm John Weaver. I'd like to know what breaks most often on the space station.
Oh, yeah, great question. I think probably without a doubt the toilet. It's a complicated piece of equipment. The space toilet is, we call it the WHC, the Waste and Hygiene Compartment, and it's complex because, as I mentioned, we do turn urine back into water, and it uses both U.S. and Russian hardware integrated in an ingenious way. And it gets a lot of use, as you can imagine. There was at one point on my time on the ISS, we had 9 crew members. And so you can imagine with that level of use, things just tend to break. And so I've been in and out of that waste and hygiene compartment to fix it multiple times. I've changed every component on it, I think, at least once, and some of them twice. But it's an ingenious piece of equipment.
Cadet James Crane wants to know, what is the research that you do while on the ISS?
Well, scientific research is one of the most important things that we're going. It's one of the, if the most important reason for the ISS program to conduct science on this orbiting laboratory, and it covers all different fields of science, chemistry, biology, medical human research. We do tech demos, earth science and earth observation. Like I mentioned, some of the pictures that I was taking of a disaster area just today in Zambia and Africa. Some of the medical research that we do, we serve as the subjects on board. Over the course of my expeditions 60, 61, and 62, more than 300 or so experiments have been conducted or will have been conducted over the course of my time here. Some of them I will have had direct interaction with, but a lot of them just operate autonomously as instruments outside the ISS or even here inside the pressurized cabin, conducting science with little maintenance from the astronauts on board. But all kinds of exciting new developments going on up here every day, and it fills our time very, very well.
Sir, I'm Cadet Rhett Perry. Are there language barriers between countries represented on the ISS?
So the ISS program is a partnership of 15 different countries, and in fact, all 15 flags are here behind me, representing the European Space Agency, the Russian Space Agency, Canadian Space Agency, Japanese Space Agency, and then, of course, NASA. And the agreement on board the ISS is that all astronauts, the official languages on board are Russian and English. And so I, as part of my training, had to achieve a certain proficiency level of in Russian, and that's true of our cosmonaut colleagues as well. Then for our other international partners that speak other languages, they also have to learn English and Russian, and those are the languages that we speak on board. And so that is one way that we have a common language, is that we reduce the languages of many countries down to just speaking those two. But the international partnership is one of the most beautiful things about this program, and it will be one of the most, in my opinion, the most important enduring legacies of the ISS program as we go further as part of the Artemis program and on to Mars. Those will be a part of international partnerships as well.
Thank you so much, Colonel Morgan. We had thank you so much, Colonel Morgan. We had one shout out from Colonel Hamilton, who says "Go Buffaloes," and we want to turn it.
I know Steve Hamilton. Yes, go Buffs and go Circus.
And we want to turn it back to you for any final thoughts or comments. We would also hope that you might say a spirit message for us that we could use come the next Army Navy. Next Army Navy.
Well, so do I understand you? We need a dirt rock speed Navy. I'm happy to do that in a way that we can capture for next year's Army Navy game. So, and I'll follow it with a flip. Okay, dirt rocks beat Navy. Well, it has been my pleasure to speak with all of you tonight. I know that right now there's a lot of uncertainty and maybe some angst on the earth overall as we look forward to the coming weeks, and I'm confident that things will continue to get better. I want to say that I'm so proud of all the cadets from the department, but all the cadets and the Corps of Cadets as a whole. You are going through some of the best years of your life, and you're getting some of the best experiences that you will draw on for the rest of your career and the rest of your life. And I'm just so proud of you, and I look forward to coming back to our Rockbound Highland home and meeting you all in person.
Thank you so much again, Colonel Morgan, and from the Department of Geography and Environmental Engineering and all of West Point. Love telling you safe travel.
Safe travel and be safe.
Beat Navy, and we'll see you on Earth in a couple of weeks. Take care.
That's so cool. Yay! I don't know when the feed is going to stop, but I'm just going to keep on broadcasting on our little Teams group until they cut it off. Thanks so much to everybody for doing that amazing job with asking the questions. You guys were awesome. Thanks.
Well done. If I can just jump in, well done, Colonel Kimball. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thanks for asking a question.
Thanks for giving me an opportunity. That was awesome.
Woo!
All right. Everyone have a great evening. Thank you so much.
Space.
Ma'am, thanks for joining us. You did a great job. Well done.
Thank you.